everybody. So I prayed for a supernatural childbirth without pain, and that's what happened. So come on over here and sit down with me and I'll tell you how it went. We've talked about this in an earlier video about supernatural childbirth, but I wanted to go through the specifics of how it happened with our first daughter. In the very beginning, when I found out I was pregnant, it was like, yay, we're gonna have a baby. And then it was like, oh my gosh, we're gonna have a baby, which means I'm gonna have to probably push that baby out of there, and that's scary. It's gonna hurt, right? I've seen the movies. I'm gonna scream and cuss. I don't know, I might probably tell my husband I hate it, and it's gonna be the most horrible thing ever, right? I mean, isn't that what the movies tell you? I didn't want that to be my story, but I didn't really know anything different, and so that was like, okay, well, what am I gonna do? So a really close and trusted friend told me about a book that she had been reading called Supernatural Childbirth by Mize. So I got it, ordered it, read it. I mean, it's a pretty quick read, and I loved it. I loved what it said. It was revolutionary for me at that point. This book actually changed my way of thinking completely. So we can talk about it a little bit more, but I gotta go get my laundry. Okay, so I got the book and I started to read it, The Supernatural Childbirth. Now, there are plenty of methods that you're going to read about on the internet. There's breathing techniques, there's yoga, stretching. None of those are wrong. In fact, the more you know, the better. Knowledge is power. The more you know about what you're going to go into, the better off you're going to be. However, this is what worked for me, and I'll explain why and kind of what the book's about. The first thing that's most important in all of this is, what does God say? And I guess that's the foundation. So I'm going to read out of the book from Genesis. This is a verse in Genesis. So for those of you that might have some biblical knowledge, this might sound familiar. It says, "Unto the woman he said, I will greatly multiply your sorrow and your conception. In sorrow you shall bring forth children." In sorrow. Okay, so basically the Old Testament, Genesis is the Old Testament, and it's saying childbirth is going to be lame. So after the initial excitement of pregnancy, when we found out, that's what settled into my head. It's going to be lame. So when I got this book, I wasn't really expecting what I was going to read next, and that is a verse out of Galatians. Now, Galatians is New Testament, so we're talking New Covenant here. So it says, "Christ has redeemed us from the curse of the law. He has redeemed us." That means that we have redemption in all areas, and we have a personal relationship with him, and so we can ask for things like a pain-free childbirth. And I'll tell you a little bit more about this later, but I had a list of, I don't want to call them demands, but I definitely had a list of things that I was hopeful for, and he gave me every single one of them. So anyways, we are redeemed. That's the important part. We are in the new covenant now. We're not under the law or the old covenant. Now, Old Testament's important, but in this case, New Testament is where it's at. So that's the most important thing. That's our foundation, is we are redeemed. Second part that's important, how does it work? So one thing that she said in here that absolutely just blew my mind is she says, I refuse to call them labor pains. Instead, she says, I'm going to call them muscle contractions. Now, she has an example in here that really just blew my mind, and that was make a muscle, so flex, right? Okay, if you sit there and flex for a long time and do it over and over and over, how are you going to feel? You're going to get fatigued. And are you going to get a little bit sore? Maybe. But is it going to be painful? No. And she said that was how she was going to view her muscle contractions, her labor contractions. And so here's my foundation. I've been redeemed. My next layer is going to be contractions, not pain. And then the third part, there's more to it than this, but this is kind of the important stuff, in my opinion, was what should I say? And that's basically when you have the well-meaning friends that come to you with their stories of being in labor for 77 hours, or that it was the most horrible thing that they've ever had, that's when you either, if you are comfortable, you either politely interrupt and say, yeah, I'm just focusing on the positive, or you just kind of and just don't listen and smile and nod and remember your foundation and remember the promises that Christ has given us. Now, I know there are plenty of moms, actually, well, I don't know that. I know several moms who have prayed into a pain-free childbirth and they didn't get it. And I don't know why. That's one of the mysteries that we're just going to have to talk to God about when we get to heaven. However, I will tell you this. I went into it knowing that there was a possibility that it might not work, but I would rather go into labor with the promises of God on my lips than going into it with fear and anxiety of, oh my gosh, this is going to be horrible. Because what do you have to lose? I had nothing to lose except maybe having a really lame delivery or having it hurt really bad, but it didn't. Mine didn't hurt at all. That's not to say that it wasn't intense, but I did not have pain. And so for that, I'm super grateful for the book. But I'm going to go and check on the baby and put my stuff away, and I'll be right back, and I'll give you kind of the play-by-play of my first daughter's actual birth and how it went. So, be right back. Here is the play-by-play for my oldest daughter's supernatural birth. It was 6 a.m, and my husband was working nights, and so he had just gotten home, and I had just woken up, and I was having contractions. They weren't anything yet, but they felt different than the Braxton Hicks contractions. It was like a deeper, kind of like a period cramp, but they were just really light. But they were kind of like, like the mosquito in the air. So he went to bed. I didn't say anything to him because I wanted him to get some sleep, because if I was in labor, I was going to need him to be, awake and rested and all that. So I tried a few things. I went on a short walk. I took a bath. A couple different things that the midwives said, if it's false labor, these things should make it stop. Well, nothing was working. So I tried to lay back down and get some sleep. No dice. So I just kind of paced and walked around and thought about what was coming and prayed a lot. So about 2 o'clock, Steve got up and I told him to call his boss. I said, "You're not going to work," and his eyes were about big as saucers. It's like, oh, it's go time. So that was about 2. About 3:30, we called our doula and asked her to come over. And we started timing contractions right around that time because they were starting to get a little bit more intense. And when I say intense, I mean just a pressure that kind of started in the back and moved forward and felt like it was squeezing my stomach. Actually, not stomach, uterus to be exact. So she showed up about 3:45 or so. We timed contractions until about 5:30, and then I decided that I wanted to go to the birth center. She was born at a birth center, and it wasn't that it was too intense, it was just I didn't want to be in the car and deal with contractions in the car. And plus I had a friend from high school whose baby was born on the side of the road. So I was like, let's not have that. So anyway, we got in the car, we left about 5:45, we got to the birth center at 6, and the hot water heater was out, and I had wanted to get in the tub immediately when showing up, and so I was a little bummed, but that's okay. So I just paced and prayed and paced and prayed, and the midwives and our doula actually went and got hot water from the next door, and they boiled water, and so they filled the tub up for me. All the while, my contractions are getting more intense, and when I say intense, it was just a squeezing, and it was probably the most intense thing that I've ever felt, especially there at the very end. So continued with that until about 8:15. I went to use the restroom, and I noticed there was a little bulb poking out, and I said, "What is that?" The midwife said, "Oh, it's your bag of water." And I'm like, "Oh, what do I do with it?" Hello? And they were like, "Oh, you can pinch it or you can let it do its thing." And I'm like, "This is just one more thing." So I just ignored it, and about, 2 or 3 minutes later, my water broke. So that was about 8:15. So from there, it was like on. My contractions sped up. They started coming really fast. She was born at 9:32 p.m. in a tub of warm water. It was amazing. Now, I did have what's called shoulder dystocia. So her shoulder got hung up on my pubic bone. So the midwives actually had to kind of move her and pull her. And you know what? Despite that, through all of this, I didn't feel pain. I definitely felt it, but there wasn't any pain. God is amazing when when you think that He created us to be able to handle these things. So I didn't feel any pain, and but it was pressure. It was definitely pressure. Lots and lots of pressure. So we've established pressure. So she was born at 9:32, and I mean, it was good. After that, we just kind of settled in with her. Now, a little bit earlier, I said I had a list of, I guess I could say, quote, demands. They weren't really demands, but these were things that I definitely was praying for. And so one of them was that I wanted her to be born. I wanted to labor and deliver in one day, and I wanted her to be born on a weekend, and I didn't want to tear. So that was my list of demands, and don't ask, I mean, I know exactly why I wanted those things, but there were very particular reasons, and it's just like God, to honor me as his daughter, to give me these things. He didn't have to, but I really feel like praying into it with this book, it worked. And the only thing that didn't happen was that I tore. However, that was due to the shoulder dystocia. The midwives actually had to pull her out to free her shoulder. So I honestly believe that I don't think that I would have torn that badly had that not happened. So that was the story. It was absolutely amazing, more than I could have hoped for. And when I came out of it, I realized, oh my gosh, I just did that and it didn't hurt. And I mean, now don't get me wrong, it wasn't like a walk in the park, it wasn't pleasurable, but it was not what everybody was making it out to be. It wasn't horrible. It was the most beautiful thing. And if there had ever been any question in my mind about the existence of God before labor and the birth of my first daughter, it would have been completely taken care of, because it was phenomenal. It was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Now, after all of this, the buzz started to die down. I kind of got back into reality, and it was just like, wow. So, okay, that's my experience with my first daughter, my first supernatural childbirth. I've had two. Maybe another time we'll talk about the second one. But if you like our videos, we would love it if you would click like and subscribe. Visit our channel. We've got a bunch of other videos, all talking about mommy stuff and baby stuff, and we'd love to have you kind of come along with us on this journey called mommyhood. So thank you so much, you guys, for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Bye. So I don't know where I'm going from here. Wait, okay, hold on. I can get my train of thought back. Okay, so those were my... Not like that.
That's a real smile.
No.